angels are not going to come to settle on the seats in front. Please come forward. If you have vacant seats in front of you, please occupy those seats. Members of the fourth estate of the realm, please settle in. Members of the press, please settle down. Thank you. If there are vacant seats in front of you, please occupy them. Please. Thank you so very much for obliging. Thank you. Thank you. When Kobam Sasukwa sang, "There are angels all around," he didn't say, "Leave vacant seats in front of you for them to sit down." He said, "You might be a moving angel, so please occupy the seats in front of you. We need you coming forward." We will be starting very soon. Very soon we will be kick-starting the event. Your Excellency, sir and ma'am, who just settled in, I think I might have to do the ushering work today. I might have to relocate some beautiful people to the front. Thank you, sir, for coming forward.
One minute.
That's why they're saying that they can't do anything now. They are connected, they're already online. We have not started, that's why they can't see anything. The HM has a problem now. Let me call Musa. All of them.
Development.
Specific issues that like you get this revenue, balance, you need to balance revenue.
That's something they
The total size of the project is already
I know. I was looking at give and take. It was the general assembly system, give and take. Whatever I think, whoever.
and then this year,
New year, and we're here gathered for the public presentation of the approved 2023 Appropriation Act. It is where we interrogate, it is where the subheads are highlighted, it is where citizens know how to keep the markers and the trackers, where to look when we go back to the budget to know if we performed creditably well. My name is Glory Ohago, and it's a huge privilege being the servant, the voice servant for this convergence today. Before we kickstart this event proper, permit me make a few recognitions here. Here in our midst, on the table of responsibility, we have Mr. Aliu Ahmed, the Permanent Secretary, Finance, Budget, and National Planning. Please, a round of applause for him. Also on this table of responsibility, we have the Permanent Secretary, Budget and National Planning, Mr. Nebolisa Anako. Please, a round of applause for him. Also here, we have our host, the very intelligent, amiable, one who is not afraid to answer questions when asked, the Director General of Budget Office of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Mr. Ben Akabweze. Please, a round of applause for him. We also have here on the table of responsibility the essay to Mr. President on National Assembly matters, Senate, Senator Babatunde Omowurare. Please, a round of applause for him. We also have here in our midst one who's paid his dues for the nation, a former Minister of Trade and Industry in Nigeria, Ola Jamodu. Please, a round of applause for him. Thank you so much, sir, for coming. We also have here in our midst, representing the Chairman, Fiscal Responsibility Commission, Mr. Mohammed Zailani. Mr. Mohammed Zailani. We also have here the Commissioner for Insurance, here represented by Sabiu Bello Abubakar, Deputy Commissioner for Insurance. As the names come and as they come to me, we will be making more recognitions. But wherever you are, please could you turn to your neighbor to the left? If you have none to the left, turn to the right and say, Happy New Year. It's going to be a great year. Please do that with a smile because it's going to be a great year. We also have here joining us virtually because Nigeria has now moved to on-site and virtual representation and interactions. We have a lot of people online who are going to be joining in the discourse and, of course, the interrogation. Could we wave from on-site and tell them we see you? Just wave. Tell them we see you. We see you and we love you. Thanks for joining us online. We will be joining you too when we get to the point where we interrogate the presentation that will be made today. In the meantime, remember to give a warm smile, a hand of welcome, and if you can, a hug to your neighbor, because we will survive and build this country together. Angels will not come down to do it. And just in case you don't know your neighbor, this is just the right time to get to know your neighbor because you never can tell what your neighbor can do for you in the year 2023. We are no longer islands. We are a cooperative society. So let's build Nigeria together. A round of applause for yourselves again. Thank you.
I sent something to you on the waiver that one of these colleges got. It's a college in my village. They got a waiver to take in people.
The new one or the one you sent last week.
Yeah, the one I sent last week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What is the fate of that? What?
No, well, I wouldn't want to bring up the submission.
Okay,
I'll
okay.
send it to them because it depends on whether their 2023 budget
Captures it.
envisaged bad recruitment and they made provision to pay the people. They didn't make.
That means they can't take them on. They can't take them on.
Yeah,
And then that means it will expire.
Yeah, that means it will expire. So I can follow up.
Okay. Okay. All right.
I don't know, head of waited
Yeah.
late.
No, it should be before the preparation of the budget.
large number of
Remember, I told you that it is a cooperative society. I must have forgotten to tell you that it takes many trees to make a forest. The Director General has able lieutenants who assist him to make the critical decisions that they need to make to move our budgetary course forward. Please join me appreciate Mrs. Modupola Lasekon, the Director, Expenditure Economy. Mrs. Modupola, where are you, ma'am? Thank you very much for what you bring on board. We also have here in our midst Mr. Fabian Ogbu, Director, Expenditure Social. Please, Mr. Fabian, could you wave? Thank you for what you bring on board. Also, we also have Mr. Ayodele Ajibosu, Director, Budget, Monetary, and Evaluation. Please, a round of applause for him. So I really like your red cap. You're looking like a wise man from the East. Thank you so very much. We also have here in our midst Malam Ishaku Sani, the head of administration. Malam Ishaku, you're welcome, Sanusa. We also have the head of accounts, Mr. Seth Anzako. Mr. Seth Anzako, you're welcome, sir. These are the able lieutenants who assist the DG to ensure that we have a seamless budget in Nigeria. Please, a round of applause for them again. More recognitions as the names come. Mrs. Dr. Zainab Shamshina Ahmed. Please, shall we give her a round of applause as she comes through? She's coming through. She's coming through. Please, when you clap, have a warm smile. Sometimes when I look to all of you on TV, I want to see you smiling a bit. You're welcome, ma'am. Please, a round of applause for her again. Thank you, ma'am. You're welcome, and Happy New Year to you, ma'am. You're welcome. The Honorable Minister, Finance, Budget and National Planning, Permanent Secretaries here present, Director General of the Budget Office, the SA to Mr. President on National Assembly, Senate, the SA to the President on Social Investment, directors, stakeholders, partners, heads of organizations, members of the Fourth Estate of the Realm, officially, once again, I welcome you to this auspicious occasion of the public presentation of the approved 2023 Appropriation Act of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. My name is Glory Ohago. I'll be the voice servant, and I do crave your indulgence that we all rise for the national anthem of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We shall exercise our voices to sing. Here we go. Arise, O compatriots, Nigeria's home away, to serve our fatherland with love and strength and faith. The labor of our heroes shall never be in vain. To serve with heart and might, one nation bound in freedom, peace and unity. In the same vein, I crave your indulgence for our opening prayers. We shall recite the second stanza of the national anthem at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, go. O God of creation, direct our noble course, guide our leaders right, help our youth the truth to know, in love and honesty to grow, and living just and true. Great lofty heights attain to build a nation where peace and justice reign. Expunge they shall. It's officially been expunged. So shall we take the last line again? Where peace and justice reign. And friends and lovers of Nigeria shall say amen and amen. Shall we all have our seats? Thank you so very much. The Honorable Minister, ma'am, members of the table of responsibility, distinguished guests, please join me with a befitting round of applause as I welcome to the podium for an opening remark the Director General, Budget Office of the Federation, Mr. Ben Akabueze. Please, a round of applause for him. You can do better.
Honourable Minister of Finance, Budget and Planning, Permanent Secretaries, Finance, and also Budget and National Planning, the Senior Special Assistant to His Excellency, Mr. President, National Assembly, Senate, Distinguished Senator Momo Warare. Let me recognize Special Advisor to His Excellency Mr. President, Mrs. Miriam Uwais, former Minister of Industry, Chief Kola Jamodu, distinguished gentlemen, friends of Nigeria, and in particular, the economists of the World Bank and other friends, development partners here, members of the gentlemen of the press, as they say, there are no ladies there, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure once again to welcome us all to the public presentation of the 2023 budget, which was signed into law by Mr. President yesterday. I am particularly delighted that for the fourth successive year, we are able to sustain the return to a predictable January to December fiscal year for Nigeria. As we gather here today, I would like to avert our attention to a matter that ordinarily would not require mention. And it is to remind us that a budget, broadly speaking, has two sides. One, revenues, and two, expenditures. Regrettably, discussions around the budget usually center around expenditures. So as we rise here today, and even since yesterday, all you've been hearing mostly is about whether the allocation to this sector is adequate or not, how much is being spent. But then, the other very important side of the budget doesn't get as much attention. And unfortunately, this is a situation that has been with us for long, and for a long time was even accentuated by the fact that what we called the federal government's budget was essentially a statement of expenditures, which is why 3 years ago we deliberately changed the format of the budget to provide detailed information on the revenue side of the budget, which hitherto used to simply reside in a schedule to the budget, in the fiscal framework schedule. And so I really would, like to encourage us to make the discussions around the 2023 budget more about, revenues. To further underscore this, for the first time in the run-up to preparing the 2023 budget, we only held detailed bilateral discussions with the ministries, departments, and agencies that have key revenue-generating responsibilities to underscore that unless we fix that side of the budget, some of the goals that we seek about how much more, what percentage of GDP should be, ideally allocated to different sectors will not be feasible. And unless we fix the revenue side of the budget, the concerns often expressed about, borrowing and isn't debt will also not be addressed. So I really would like, again, to make the point that today, as we engage on the budget, let's pay greater attention to that side of the budget. I'd also like to speak to what, in my opinion, has become a preoccupation with by certain persons in the public and the media about this term called budget padding. Before 2016, I'm sure most Nigerians didn't know about the term called budget padding. And in 2016, we had a situation where there had been a lot of unauthorized adjustments or introductions into the federal government's budget, which became described as budget padding. And this had occurred both at the executive end and the legislative end. But both sides, determined to address this matter. On the executive side, since the 2017 budget, what we changed the order of preparation of the budget such that what we do is advise MDAs of their budget ceilings, and they themselves, from their own offices, upload their budgets onto the system. And the only portion of the that basically usually gets input by the budget office is the multilateral and bilateral funded projects, which are managed centrally from the Ministry of International Economic Relations Department. But therefore, it is really not possible for people from the budget office to pad the budget, so to say. On the legislative side, what used to happen before then was that at the presentation of the budget, only the bill was presented to the entire House, not the full details. And so it was possible for the details to be manipulated after the budget has been passed. Since then, the legislature changed their system such that the Appropriations Committee must present the full details to the whole National Assembly for approval, which means after they've approved, nobody else can make surprised, changes. So, but we have remained occupied with this, and yesterday, I saw ordinarily respected newspaper had an editorial and a hasty editorial where they called out the executive and legislature for failing to keep to the January to December budget cycle on the same day that it was signed and came into operation. But in that also, they were talking still the same story that has been addressed about and clarified. So I hope that as the National Assembly has argued that in the exercise of their legislative authority, has allowed them, the Constitution, that the changes they make to the budget cannot be termed budget padding. Because budget padding is a term that describes unauthorized changes to the budget. So while it is okay to express views about what enters the budget, it's important that we appropriately describe it and label it. So with these remarks, it's once again my pleasure to welcome us and encourage us to engage on this budget. That's why we organize these sessions. Very shortly, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning will be making a detailed presentation on the budget. I urge us to pay keen attention and to basically engage. That are of key concern to us. We at the Budget Office, we operate an open door policy. We are willing at all times to engage with anyone who has any questions or any issues, whether in person or even via our website, where you have the Citizens Portal, a platform for engagement on budget-related issues. Thank you.
A round of applause for him, please. It was President Barack Obama who said, and I quote, "It's more than just a series of numbers on a page. It is an embodiment of our collective values." End quote. That resonates the fact that when we talk about the budget, as the DG has said, remember, revenues. Revenues include tax. If you're dodging in paying tax, then you don't need to go interrogate the expenditure because you are part of the problem. Please applause for him again. It's now time who will be standing on this podium for one last time for this present administration. And I think she's done really well in the past years. Please, let's clap for her on that note first. She has weathered so much storms on interrogations, on financial spendings, expenditures of government, trackings of where the money is being allocated, why it's moving from dollar, why the inflation and its place for a planning Nigeria, Mrs. Close to her.
Gentlemen, especially recognize the two permanent secretaries here. Some of these mics are moving around. Yeah, okay. And also the very hardworking DG budget of the Federation, who reminded us that it is the fourth time we're delivering a time. So let me add to that, that for me and for this administration, this is the 8th budget we're doing. And it is, for me, also the final budget that I'll have the honor and the privilege to present. Thank you. Yesterday, His Excellency, the President, presented the budget, signed the budget, and also signed a supplementary budget. Mr. President was supposed to sign the finance bill as well as the budget, but the finance bill review was not ready. Usually when a law is passed, Mr. President sends the law to relevant government agencies to review and advise. And so the advices did not all come in, and therefore he will be signing the finance bill in a couple of days. But it was passed by the National Assembly on the 31st of December, on the 30th of December, along with the supplementary as well as the 2023 budget. So, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you. Join the DG budget to welcome you, but I need to say I welcome the ladies and gentlemen of the press as well, even though I'm told that there are only gentlemen in the press, but we're querying that. So on the 3rd, which was yesterday, the President signed the budget. And recall that the National Assembly signed, first of all, the 2023 budget on 28th of November. It was under 3 months that the President did the budget. And also the finance bill was passed by the two houses and conveyed to the President. There's a final review process that we're working on, so we will soon send it to the President. The principal thrust of the 2023 budget appropriation christened the budget of fiscal consolidation and transition, fiscal viability, and ensure smooth transition to the incoming administration. So this is a budget and transition. This budget, like all budgets we've done, was also set against the background of continuous global and domestic challenges sparkled by a multiplicity of crises, most of which we are all very familiar with, including, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war that is not abating, the resurgence of the COVID-19 pandemic in some economies, elevated inflation across the world, and also a negative impact of insecurity in some parts of the domestic environment. The Nigerian economy, despite all of these challenges, has continued to sustain its recovery from recession As at the last quarter, we had recorded the 8th consecutive quarter of growth. The GDP grew by 2.25% year-on-year in real terms in the third quarter of 2022. The decline from 4.03 compared to 2021 Q3 is attributable to these global challenges that we live in today. At slide 7, let me just introduce to the meeting today the broad and diversified economic sectors of the Nigerian economy that have been contributing to the macroeconomic resilience of our economy, and also to just point out that the oil and gas sector contribution as at the third quarter of 2023 was just 5.66%. Again, this is to further emphasize that the Nigerian economy is truly, truly diversified. We can no longer be termed as a mono economy. It is the non-oil sector of the economy. You'll have a copy of this, which will be posted on our website. You will see that the agricultural sector has the highest contribution of 23%, followed by the information and communications sector, then trade, manufacturing, then the oil and gas sector. So there are several sectors of the economy that are really growing. Financial services is growing very, very rapidly. But also we've seen very significant growth in the transportation sector. Trade is growing. The sectors that are pulling back the economy is the oil and gas and the mining sector. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just present to you very briefly the performance of the 2022 budget parameters before we move to 2023. If you recall, was set at a crude oil price per barrel of crude oil production of 1.6 million barrels per day. As at the end of November, the average production is 1.21 million. I must pause here to say that we have seen production improved from October through to November. November itself, we're told, was near 1.6 million, but what we're reporting here is the average for the year. And we're hopeful that the improvement in production will be sustained and it will continue. The crude oil price that was set in the budget at $73 to the barrel had an average price of $106.76 per barrel, which is higher than what we had budgeted. The exchange rate was set at 410 naira 15 kobo. The actual was higher at 444 naira and 8 kobo. Inflation that we projected to be 16.11% is currently at 21.47%. This is as at November is 21.47%. GDP growth, as I reported earlier on, is 2.25%. So the actual performance of the 2022 budget, starting with the revenue, which I'm glad that the DG budget has emphasized, that we must be looking at the revenue even as we look at the expenditure. As at November, the federal government's retained revenue was 6.5 trillion naira, and this represents 87% of the prorated target as at November of 7.47 trillion. The federal government share of oil revenue was just 568.71 billion, representing a 35.7% performance, while the non-oil taxes totaling 2.09 trillion, a performance of 123.3%, shows that the non-oil revenue is really performing very well and in fact has been outperforming the budget. Company income tax and VAT performed at 158.6% and 124.3% respectively. The customs revenue at 15.42, performed at 102% over target. So it's 2% over target as well. Other revenues totaling 3.72 trillion also were realized, and included in this is 1.37 trillion from independent revenues. That's revenues from government-owned enterprises. At slide 12 is an overview of the expenditure as at November 2022, including the supplementary budget, was 18.14 trillion, with a prorated spending target of 16.63 trillion at the end of November 2022. But the actual spending at the end of November was 12.87 trillion, and of this 12.87 trillion, 5.24 trillion was for debt service, 3.94 trillion was for personnel costs, including pensions, 1.81 trillion was for statutory transfers, overhead, as well as other service-wide vote expenditures. The 1.88 was the total capital we've been able to release to ministries, governments, and agencies. At slide 15 is a report on the deficit performance. The fiscal deficit for 2022 was estimated to be 8.17 trillion, inclusive 30th 2022, the actual deficit performance was 6.37%. The deficit was financed by borrowing. At slide 15, now moving on to the 2023 budget. At slide 15, the fiscal framework projections for the 2023 budget included an oil price benchmark of $75 per barrel. Some of the parameters that are underlying the 2023 plan of 2021 to 2025, and this is because we had to adjust to a combination of current realities as well as an adjustment to the modified medium-term outlook to bring that also to reality. For instance, the real GDP was projected to be 3.75% in 2023, compared to 4.37% that we had projected in the medium-term development plan. Growth is expected to moderate to 3.3% in 2024 before it picks up again to 3.46% in 2025. Inflation rate is projected to average 17.16% in 2023, so we're expecting inflation to moderate and begin to go down, and by the end of 2023, it should average 17.16%, and also further decline to 14.93%. This is, of course, our projections. We're hoping that the Russia-Ukraine war abates and that the global economic growth projection improves, or at least stays at the current assumption level, that it does not decline. So at slide 18, the projected fiscal outcomes in the 2023 budget is based on petroleum subsidy reform ratio, and that is to say, in the 2023 framework, we had assumed, and the National Assembly had approved, that the petroleum based on the 18 months extension announced early in 2022. In this regard, only 3.36 trillion has been provided. There will also be tighter enforcement of the performance management framework for government-owned enterprises that will result in further increase in operating surpluses and dividend remittances in 2023. The monitoring that we have been doing has been yielding results, as you have seen earlier in the performance of the independent revenues of 2022. So total revenue available at slide 19 to fund the 2023 FGM budget is estimated at 10.49 trillion naira, and this includes gross revenues of 63 government-owned enterprises totaling 3.87 trillion. Of this, federal government oil revenue share is projected to be 2.29 trillion, non-oil taxes at 2.43 trillion, and federal government independent revenues at 2.64 trillion. Other revenues totaling 762 billion are also projected in the 2023 revenues of 10.49 trillion. So in aggregate, 22% of the projected revenues are expected from oil-related sources, while 78% is to be earned from the non-oil resources. If you recall, I remember the first budget that we passed, last 2026 budget, the oil revenue was 70%, while non-oil revenue was 30%. So we are very happy that we've been able to turn things around and turn the story to the opposite direction, that today only 22% of government revenue is contributed by the oil sector. At slide 20 is an analysis of this revenue, and I will leave you to what the revenues are. You see details of what these revenue lines are, and they include the share of the oil revenue, contribution of dividends from the NLNG, Bank of Industry, and a few others, share of non-oil taxes, contribution of CIT, VAT, customs, as well as other federation levies, share of electronic money transfer, which is projected to be 19.088 billion naira in 2023, compared to 29.367 billion naira in 2022. There's also the share of revenues from the government-owned enterprises at 3.8 trillion, and then operating surpluses, that is remittances that we're expecting from the GOEs at 1.47 trillion, independent revenues 2.615 trillion, and several others that are detailed in the report. So at slide 21 is an overview of the 2023 federal government expenditures. The 2023 federal government expenditures, inclusive of government-owned enterprises and project-tied loans, is projected to be 21.83 trillion, which is 20% higher than the amended budget of 2022. The recurrent non-debt spending estimated to be 8.33 trillion, inclusive of 200 billion for the National Social Investment Program. Aggregate capital expenditure of 6.46 trillion is 30% of total expenditure, and also 3.5% lower than the 2022 budget, inclusive of capital component of statutory transfers, government-owned enterprises capital, as well as project-tied loans. At 6.31 trillion, debt service is 29% of total government expenditure. At 6.31%, debt service is 29% of total government expenditure. This is 71% higher than the estimate for 2022, and it includes interest repayment of 1.2 trillion for the CVN overdraft that is popularly called the Ways and Means. So the details of this expenditure are on slide 22. I invite you to get a copy of this presentation from the website and look at the details. You will see that statutory transfers is 967 billion. Debt service is 6.309 trillion, higher than 3.685 trillion projected in the 2022 budget. There is a sinking fund provision, as well as recurrent non-debt expenditure that has increased from 7.108 trillion to 8.32 trillion. And also, there is aggregate capital expenditure that has declined from 6.681 trillion to 6.445 trillion. So total expenditure of 21.82 trillion, which is the size of the federal government expenditure budget. At slide 23 is an update, is a report on the fiscal deficit and also our plan for financing the fiscal deficit. So the overall fiscal deficit is 11.34 trillion for 2023, and this represents 5.03% of the GDP. The deficit, the budget deficit is to be financed mainly by borrowings, and this includes 7.04 trillion from domestic sources, 1.76 trillion from foreign sources, and 1.77 trillion from multilateral, bilateral loan drawdowns. And these are loans that have already been acquired and are being implemented. The drawings from the loan projection is 1.77%. Then privatization proceeds of 206.18 billion naira. The gap between revenue and additional financing and total expenditure amounting to 553.46 billion is being expected to be financed by additional revenue from spectrum fees and also from tax from the maritime sector. You recall when the president was presenting the budget yesterday, he did mention that there's a gap of 553 billion that has not been adjusted in the fiscal framework and has directed the ministry to work with the National Assembly to fix that. During the appropriation process, the National Assembly identified additional revenues that will be realized from GSM spectrum license, which was not in what we submitted, as well as additional revenues that can be realized from the maritime sector. But the fiscal framework was not adjusted, and we realized that very, very, very late. So, ladies and gentlemen, slide 24 is just a picture to show what I had explained earlier in terms of the deficit, and also just to call attention to the fact that the deficit to GDP ratio is 5.03%, which is higher than the 3% as stipulated by the Fiscal Responsibility Act. And we're working with the National Assembly to determine what we need to do, whether or not we need to amend that provision of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, because several countries have actually done that. In the times in which we live in today, that 3% is no longer realistic. So we are working with the National Assembly, the possibility of doing just that. So in terms of debt management, again, I'm sure the audience here is familiar with our medium-term debt management strategy, which has some fiscal sustainability measures, including that public debt as a percentage of GDP should not be more than 40%. Domestic and external debt ratio should be 70-30. So at public debt to GDP, we have 22.8%. This is as at 2022, but this has since moved on to 35.33%. Once this is as of September, once we adjust to the ways and means that has already been approved to be securitized. So once we bring it in, this will take us to 35.33%. The average tenor of the loans also is still within 10 years, 10.7, 10.28, which is the actual, but we have also progressively worked on improving that so that the minimum tenor is 10 years, but we also have some instruments now that are as long as 30 years. Let me then move us on to slide 27, which is just explaining that we have had to issue some federal government guarantees. And federal government guarantees, even though they are not direct borrowing of the federal government, they're still contingent liability of government. And we take them in to report the size of government deficit. So far, what we have as a percentage of the GDP of federal government guarantees is 2.64% as at November 2022. And we're not planning on debt restructuring. Nigeria has remained committed to meeting its obligations and has consistently been able to meet both its domestic and external obligations. And our projections in the medium term is that this will continue to be so. The federal government will continue to utilize appropriate debt management tools to streamline the costs as well as the risk profile in the debt, including through concessionary borrowings, spreading out debt maturities to make sure that you don't have a bunching, that you don't have too much to repay at any particular point in time, reprofiling the maturities by refinancing short-term to the Strategic Revenue Growth Initiative at slide 30. The initiative, of course, since 2019 that we launched it, has been designed to improve tax revenues from both oil as well as non-oil sources. And I must say that we have achieved remarkable results in improving non-oil revenues. We've also seen significant improvements in revenues from the Nigerian Customs Service, and also very, very remarkable improvements in revenues from government-owned enterprises. At slide 32 is to remind us that this administration, and this is the fourth year, has adopted a practice, if you like, a tradition of finance bills to support the implementation of the annual budget. And consistent with this practice, the 2022 finance bill has the focus of ensuring tax equity and a couple of provisions that would enhance tax equity, including being able to clarify that 35% of the electronic money transfer levy is also to be shared with the local government. When we passed the first amendment on the electronic money transfer levy, and the mention in the act was for states, so the states were excluding the local government. So this is just to emphasize that the sharing includes the local government. There's also the second focus, which is climate change and green growth. And this is designed for us to complement non-fiscal reforms and also to support the facilitation of domestic and international investments in climate adaptation, as well as mitigation, and enhance the opportunities in green growth as well as in job creation. There's also the focus of job creation itself, as well as economic growth, and the design is to implement very important public procurement reforms that will enhance government priority expenditure, to also fund on a sustainable basis multilateral institutions that Nigeria belongs to in order to qualify for increased funding and other reforms from these multilateral agencies, and to complement, of course, the ease of doing business reforms. Reforming tax incentives is a commitment that we have made, and we started working on it already. We're phasing out antiquated corporate income tax incentives for matured industries, and maybe people popularly just understand when you say pioneer tax. We have pioneer tax provisions that are dated to 1958 or something. So there are some industries from that schedule at that time that were classified as infant, and we're saying they have grown, they need to exit, and we need to bring real infant industries to benefit Such industries are industries that are now growing in the IT sector that didn't used to exist, that need these opportunities. And we're glad that the startup bill also emphasizes that. So we will be exiting some industries from incentives like Pioneer Tax, and we are aware that it is not going to be a very popular thing to do, but it's a must do for us. As at 2021, the tax expenditure of government was 6 trillion naira. So that is 6 trillion naira revenue foregone in terms of different kind of tax incentives, tax holidays, exemptions of import duties, different kind of waivers. That's revenue that could have remained with government. While we appreciate the need to provide incentives to encourage industry, but we have to create a balance that we're not giving out too much without getting much into the economy in return. So the last focus of the finance bill is the revenue generation and tax administration, an obvious one, of course, combating tax evasion and aggressive tax planning, aligning the Petroleum Industry Act of 2021 with the Petroleum Tax Administration, so that the two taxes are in alignment with each other. So we're not making any changes in the PIA. We're just amending the current tax laws to make sure they align to the provisions in the PIA, the Petroleum Industry Act. We are also, again, complementing the ease of doing business. The Finance Bill 2022 has amended 11 different tax laws. You can see them on the screen at slide 33. And the details of the finance bill itself, once it's assented into law, will be available for public examination. So at slide 35 is starting to speak on the critical sectoral allocations in the 2023 budget. We have, of course, statutory transfers, which are in an aggregate sum of 967.5 billion, provided as statutory transfers, and this represents an increase of 223.38 billion over the executive budget proposal, which means there were some increases at the appropriation level. So within the whole of these statutory transfers, there's 228.1 billion for National Assembly, 173.6 billion for INEC, 165 billion for the Judicial Council of Nigeria, that's the judiciary arm of government, 119.9 billion for NDDC, Niger Delta Development Commission, 103.3 billion for UBEC, Universal Basic Education, 59 billion for NEDC, Northeast Development Commission, 51.6 billion for the Basic Health Care Provision Fund, and 51.6 billion for NASENI, and 10.7 billion and 4.5 billion for National Human Rights Commission. As slide 36 is a continuation of, for the education sector, the total allocation is 1.79 trillion, representing 8.2% of the FGM budget. And this includes 972.93 billion for the main ministry itself, both its recurrent and capital, as well as its agencies. Then 103.29 billion for UBEC, 248.27 billion for TET Fund, as well as 470 billion for the provisions made for tertiary education revitalization, as well as salary enhancement. So 1.79 trillion, representing 8.2% for the education sector. For the health sector, on the other hand, the total provision is 1.15 trillion, representing 5.3% of the budget of the FGM. Counterpart funding for donor-supported programs, as well as Global Fund. There is also a provision of 51.64 billion that is the statutory transfer for the Basic Healthcare Provision Fund. Other sectors, critical sectors in the 2023 budget, allocations for defense and the security sector, 2.98%, representing 13.4%. Works and housing, power, transport, water resources, aviation, 1.24 trillion, representing 5.7% of the budget. Social development and poverty reduction programs, 809.32 billion, representing 3.7%. And these amounts are provisions for the social investment program, as well as the poverty reduction programs of government. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2023 budget, again, was prepared for a challenging world economy. Like other countries of the world, the economy faces headwinds from these factors, compounded in our case by pockets of domestic security challenges. Fiscal risks globally are elevated, following weaker than expected economic performance, as well as structural issues that are adversely impacting our domestic economy. However, interventionists and reflationary measures have significantly moderated the impact of these current challenges. The early passage of the 2023 budget is critical to effective delivery of government's legacy projects, achievements of macro, fiscal, and sectoral objectives, smooth transition program, and effective takeoff of the incoming administration. To achieve these objectives, the Budget Office will intensify our revenue mobilization efforts and intensify current efforts towards the realization of crude oil production as well as export targets. We will continue to augment available resources by accelerating of public-private partnership initiatives, especially those designed to fast-track the pace of our infrastructure development. However, government remains mindful and committed to the need to provide safety nets to cushion the impact of reform measures on the vulnerable segments of our society. The implementation of these measures are aimed at further improving the Nigerian business environment, as well as enhancing the welfare of our people and ensuring sustainable medium to long-term growth will be accelerated. We, of course, welcome citizens in enhancing budget monitoring, and we invite you to visit our platforms at iMonitor in the Budget Office website, Citizens Budget Monitoring, also which you can find at Google Store, and then the new iMac that was recently launched.
The lady in lemon. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, Honorable Minister and officials here. My name is Onyenwa Chukwu. I report for Business Day. Mine is on the planned securitization of CBN ways and means advances, to the federal government. Now we are saying, will I call it back and forth between the executive and lawmakers? The president has urged them to approve, and they are insisting they will have to do the normal checks. Just wondering whether there's some kind of plan B in case, for some reason, that plan doesn't come through, the National Assembly doesn't endorse that plan. Is there any plan B to handle that huge loan by the CBN to government? Thank you.
Thank you so very much. For all our online participants, we await your interrogation on the chat box. We will take them. Honorable Minister, if you would address these 4 questions so that we go to the second batch of 4.
Okay, I'm coming there.
Or would you rather I have the extras at once? You want to come here?
Do you want to take more?
If you, I'd crave your indulgence to take more. Thank you. All right, the man who was on the first row, that yes, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Okay, so we start from the lady there, and then we move to the man in burgundy, and then the man in the African wear.
Good morning, Minister. I'm Olatokiwa Ayuade from Kiss FM Radio. Ma, I would like to know how you plan to execute a budget of over 2.1 trillion in 5 months. I was wondering, why is it not a 6-month budget? And I'd also like you to give me a target of level of implementation before you leave. Thank you. Projection, sorry.
The gentleman in burgundy shirt. Yes, him.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
She's coming here.
Okay, Honorable Minister, Happy New Year. I'm interested in knowing.
Oh, what's
My
that?
name is Basi.
Who, sir? Where's that coming from? Okay, sorry, I didn't know it was you. I didn't hear your voice quite well. Sorry, it's you. You have the floor.
Okay.
Could you add the extra microphone, the mobile mic? Okay.
Okay. My name is Basi Udo. I work for Media TrackNet Nigeria. My interest, Honorable Minister, has to do with the debt profile of Nigeria. By September, the Debt Management Office said the debt situation has climbed up to over 44 trillion. And now there is this other issue of pending ways and means that one of my colleagues mentioned that is yet to be approved or securitized by, approved by the presidency. I want to know, at the time that this administration would exit government, how much debt are we likely to have to contend with? Thank you.
We'll now move to the gentleman in burgundy. Elder Statesman Sabasi. Happy New Year, sir. The burgundy, yes, him. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, my name is Mark Sibo. I report for Leadership Newspapers. I want to pick some details from the budget, especially from the Ministry of Works. I see that Ministry of Works will be spending some monies on different monies for the same reasons. For instance, they talk about monitoring. They said that they will be spending 7.6 million naira for monitoring and evaluation of capital projects. That's for works. And then there's another provision for 4 million naira for Ministry of Housing. And then there's another one, say specialized assessment and mandatory capital budget monitoring. That's 218 million. And then there's another 100 million naira for inspection of projects under. So the list just goes on and on. I want to ask the DG budget if that is captured under his eyes.
Thank you. Beside him, the last man that, thank you.
Yes, I'll call you to answer some of the questions.
Good morning, Honorable Minister. Good morning, the high table. I am Benjamin Muteme with Blueprint Newspapers. Yes, I'm a little bit worried. And, okay, I shouldn't worry. Yeah. Okay, my concern is that, the president said that they will be borrowing to fund the supplementary budget. And again now, while your presentation, you said that we'll be borrowing for next year will be higher by 71%. And I was just wondering, now this budget has been ascended to. The last one is still running. No, please, I will need you to educate me. What is the implication of this on the economy and the entire economy? Thank you.
Okay, we will allow the Honorable Minister respond to these questions. And please, the year is in its 4th day. Don't worry, be happy. Honorable Minister, ma'am, the podium is yours.
Thank you very much. I thought this was easier than moving all the mics. Let me start by thanking the distinguished Senator Adjila Olamilekan for contributing to this discussion. We didn't give him a heads up, but I knew that he was going to speak about revenue. And I know that he would be speaking about what they did to add revenues to the budget. It was just to emphasize again, that the budget is not just about expenditure. It's a combination of expenditure as well as revenue. And also that the appropriation process, as provided for by the Constitution, enables the Parliament to make adjustments to both revenue as well as expenditure. So thank you very much, Chairman Finance Committee, for that contribution. And let me also welcome the various participants online. I saw a total of 605 people online, including some very high profile professionals that have joined the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. So let me move on to the first question by Mr. Imar from Vanguard. He said that on the performance of the 2022 budget, we had reported 568 billion by November as a performance of the oil and gas sector, and yet we're projecting 2.29 trillion as oil and gas sector performance in 2023. Let me start by saying that this 2.29 trillion, again, is 22% of the projected revenue for 2023. And also, during my presentation, I had reported that the National Oil Company, NNPC Limited, had reported that by October and by November, they had reached 1.6 million barrels per day. There's a lot of measures that have been taken by the federal and the state governments to ensure that production has picked up, and production has picked up. And our hope, of course, is we have to plan on this sustained production. So if the production is sustained even at that minimum 1.6, we will be able to reach this revenue. And remember, we're also going to be exiting fuel subsidy by the middle of the year. So it will mean more revenue accruing to the Federation. Subsidy cost is a cost to the Federation. It eats up into the oil and gas revenue. So yes, we prepared this on the optimistic side, being assured that the security and the production will be sustained. And if it is sustained, these revenues are realizable. In fact, they are on the conservative side, because we always try to be conservative. And we have been reconciling with the National Oil Company, the NNPC, on oil subsidy, and this is done on a monthly basis. They report on what is the cost. Unlike before, NNPC is not remitting revenue to the Federation. So now what we're doing is they're sending us invoices. so that we see what the cost is, and we're supposed to agree how to pay them on a subsequent basis. But there's a larger reconciliation process. For many years, in the books of the Federation account, the NMPC has a very significant liability. So there's a wider reconciliation process going on beyond the monthly reconciliation that is just focused on subsidies and cost of production for those for that specific month. And at the end of the reconciliation, there will be a decision as to who is owing who, and then a settlement arrangement is made between the NMPC Limited and the Federation, not just the federal government. So second question was from Leah from NTA. She said, any place in the 2023 budget for stamp duties? What we have in the 2023 budget is the electronic money transfer levy. It's not stamp duties. It has ceased to be referred to as stamp duties since 2 last budget cycles. And this is levies the 15 naira that is charged by a bank for any financial transaction that takes place within the banking system. And yes, there's a provision. I think in my details I announced something like DG Budget can confirm, something like 19.6 or 19.9. 19. That is what will come to the federal government. And remember, the federal government component is just 15%. That is what comes to the federal government. 85% is to the states and the local government. So maybe we can work out what the total will be and announce that DG budget subsequently. Sarah from Channels also asked that IMF said 2023 will be difficult. Yes, it is going to be a difficult year because it's still a year that is quite possibly going to continue witnessing some of the global crises that are not abating. Specifically, the Russia-Ukraine war is not showing any signs of abating. And so that's one major component. The second component is the inflation growth across the world. The monetary authorities globally are still tightening, which means interest cost goes up, and that drives inflation. So it's just for every country to know that these difficulties are there and will be there through 2023, and we have to take our own measures to cushion those measures from running down any economy. And we've been able to do that consistently by making sure that despite the very extreme fiscal challenges, the government has stayed afloat, that the economy has continued to grow, and that we have been able to consistently provide support where support is needed. Of course, the consequence of that is we have had to borrow more than we would have if things were working very well. But we are convinced that reflating the economy is the right measure to take, because the size of the Nigerian economy and the size of the population, allowing the country to not just slip into recession, in some cases, some countries went into depression, is not a possibility that Nigeria should contemplate. It will not be a good thing. So we've taken the reflationary stand as the stance that we need to continue to implement, while at the same time trying to provide fiscal buffers as well as supporting the most vulnerable within the economy. Question number 4 was from Onyechukwu this day on the CBN Ways and Means. We sent the CBN Ways and Means request, to be honest, on the 27th, and the Assembly read it on the 28th, first reading on the 29th. It's a very important request that the President has sent to the National Assembly. This 22.7 trillion Ways and Means has built up from 2014 to 2022. So the National Assembly has a need to look more closely as to the report that they got, and there was just not enough time to do that in one day. That's the feedback that we got. They formed a special committee, the two houses, We have all our documents relating to this transaction. We'll be meeting with them and showing them how this has happened. But part of the things that we expect will happen is that once this is approved, it brings a very significant fiscal relief to the federal government. Currently, the Ways and Means is running interest rate at MPR plus 3, which today is averaging about 18.5%. That's a very, very high cost. So if this is not approved, we will end up with interest rates accruing again and adding to the Ways and Means anything from 1.8 trillion to about 2.2 trillion. So that will be the consequence. I'm sure also the Parliament understand and appreciate that. So once that approval is given, we'll benefit from a lower interest cost of 9%, we'll benefit from a stretched negotiated plan that we have made of 40 years with a 3-year moratorium. That will provide very significant fiscal relief to the federal government. And the President has urged the National Assembly to pass this, but has also urged them to do their usual legislative work, so that even if it is passed and assented to by the President, it does not mean that the details of how it was built up cannot be checked or investigated, and we are ready for that review process. At question number 5, Mr. Ola from Olatekunwa, I hope I haven't spelled your name, apologies, on the how we plan to spend 21.53 trillion in 5 months. I don't understand. This is 2023 budget. It's for the fiscal year January to December 2023. Yes, there'll be a transition, there'll be a new government, but government is a continuum. When the President came into power, he inherited a budget that we continued to implement. We didn't change anything. In fact, if anything, the President directed that we should carefully review all ongoing projects and prioritize the completion of ongoing projects that will have impact on the people. If you recall, most of the projects that were initially completed were started by previous administrations but continued by this administration. So we hope that whichever government comes will have the same priorities, that we must protect the security and the welfare of the people, that we must make adequate provision for healthcare, for education, we must make provision for the social protection of our people, and we must continue to build ongoing critical infrastructure such as roads, rail lines, seaports, airports that are necessary to enhance the business environment and also enhance the livelihoods of our people. So there is nothing strange in the priorities that our government has set that will not be difficult for any subsequent government to pick up and continue the implementation of the 2023 budget. And remember, the law allows also for a budget to be amended. So in the event that a new administration comes and thinks they want to, and decide they want to make an adjustment to the budget, they will have to go and make an adjustment because this is a law of the land that is in place. So they have to go back to the Parliament and do their reviews and make appropriate adjustments to the 2023 budget. Again, Mr. Basi Udo, his question is about the debt profile. The Debt Management Office on a quarterly basis consistently reports on debt, and I have the DG DMO online. I'll invite her subsequently to respond to the question that you have raised. Mr. Mark Sibo from Leadership raised a question on the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, some expenditure that you say appear to be the same in several budget lines. DG Budget will address that. Mr. Benjamin from Blueprint also said the borrowing to fund the supplementary budget to finance the budget for 2021 has increased by 71%. That is a reflection of the level of not just the borrowing, but the impact of very low revenues that we had specifically from the oil and gas sector and the need that government had to continue to fund for a subsidy. The first subsidy cost is a very, very high one. we were funding it also from borrowing. So ladies and gentlemen, let me just, again, just pause here, but I'll invite DG Budget to come here and add some comments to the ones that I have made, and then subsequently, if Sec Finance has any points they can make as well. There was some question regarding CBN, and then the DG DMO on their borrowing. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Just to add, in response to Leah Katung's question regarding the stamp duties, at which the Honorable Minister clarified that what we have actually is the electronic money transfer levy. For that, there's a total of 132 billion naira provide for the entire federation, of which the federal government's share is 50% less cost of the collection. But there is still, nonetheless, something called stamp duty, which FIRS collects, and which is chargeable on contracts and certain transfers of title. But that doesn't amount to much. For those of you who do business with the federal government, you recall that there's a 1% stamp duty that you're required to pay on contracts. There was a question regarding the seeming multiplicity of provisions in the budget of the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, and that was addressed to me specifically to explain. The Federal Ministry of Works and Housing is organized, structured around departments and zones. And, so they tend to prefer to keep their M&E budgets for each zone, for each department, distinct. And that's why you have them. But when you aggregate all of the provisions that they have made for monitoring and evaluation and express it as a percentage of their total capital budget, it comes to very little. Indeed, what you will get is below what is, the norm in terms of M&E expenditure. So, if you're spending, like they've got hundreds of billions naira, project sites, and that includes the cost of the travel and sometimes engaging external consultants to express some professional view on the work that is being done. Thank you.
A round of applause to our Honorable Minister and our DG. We have two questions from online. Okay, the DG DMO will take the floor now. Technical team, please put the DG of the Debt Management Office on.
Good morning, the Honorable Minister. I think I listened to some of the questions, so let me speak directly as you advised to the question by Mr. Udo. I think in part the Minister has addressed it by saying the public debt data is published quarterly, and we usually even follow that up with some explanatory notes so that observers and interested parties like you can understand the trend and what is happening. Specifically to your question, it was a case of what will the debt stock be by May 2023, technically. So I think Nigeria is one of those countries that is very transparent in the management of its public debt. So as you said yourself, there's already 44 trillion as at September. We don't expect the figure to be significantly different by December, not significantly different because we had done most of the domestic borrowing in September, so it won't be significantly different. But let me quickly add, for the sake of everybody who is listening, that really the public debt is an aggregation of the federal government's debt, that of the 36 state governments, as well as the Federal Capital Territory. So all of those, when aggregated, would result in a higher level, certainly, than September. Secondly, there were lots of discussions about the ways and means, and in addition to the cost savings, significant cost savings in debt service, which will be derived by securitizing it. There's the element of transparency in the sense that this is now going to be reported in the public debt stock once the approval from the National Assembly is released. So the public has full data on all the debt outstanding. So technically, if that is approved sometime this year, hopefully early this year by the National Assembly, it means you'll be seeing that figure included in the public debt. So you're already at a figure of about 77 trillion naira just by adding that. But like I said, it does serve two major purposes: debt transparency and then the reduction in the public debt stock. So if you add the new borrowing, again, the budget is for the full year. So it's not like the entire new borrowing in the budget will be raised before the end of this administration. Certainly some part of that will be done, give or take, say, depending on market conditions, 5 trillion. So you're looking anywhere at about 72 trillion at about June. Again, for the new borrowing, this depends on market conditions. The other element of the debt stock we have tried to highlight, which we will do again, we've done that in all our press briefings, is to say the debt stock is also growing from the issuance of promissory notes, which are not new borrowings as such by the government, but arrears, some of them inherited. So we just want some balance when we're reporting the reasons for the growth in the debt stock. So we expect that between now and June, some new promissory notes will be issued. So I think it is safe to say that we'll be looking at 70 trillion or thereabout, how much new borrowing we can raise. In concluding, I think one of the things we should not stop saying is that while the debt is growing and there's new borrowing, debt is being managed under a public debt management strategy, which is a public document, while on the other side, extremely important, revenue is receiving significant attention. Like Dioma always says, you can't talk about debt only without talking about revenue. We need the two to work together for the debt service ratio to come down. Thank you.
A round of applause for the DG of the Debt Management Office, please. Also online, we have our Honorable Minister of Water Resources, Alhaji Suleiman Adamu. Please, a round of applause for him. Honorable Minister, ma'am, we have some questions from our online participants. This one is coming from Chris Azor. The question is, what are the monitoring and evaluation mechanisms embedded in the budget, and what resource provisions are put in place for transparency, accountability, and integrity for implementation? He adds, again, how does the budget speak to synergy and collaborations with the sub-national governments? Furthermore, can you explain the real issues in the controversy surrounding the securitization of ways and means borrowings from the CBN? Thank you. That's from Chris Azor. We have another one from Olaniran Blessing Ojoma. And the question is, what is the government doing to reduce recurrent expenditure and increase capital expenditure? And okay, the second question is from Olaniran Blessing Ojoma. What is the government doing to reduce recurrent expenditure and increase capital expenditure? And finally, from Vayala Kwaga. Vayala Kwaga. The question is, please, may I know why the federal government did not include the budget of government-owned enterprises in the passing of the 2023 budget? It appears the budgets of the GOEs were passed separately. Thank you. Those are the 3 questions that we've had so far from online interrogating the presentation, Honorable Minister. You may wish to take it from there. Okay, she's coming over here. Please, a round of applause to her.
Well, thank you very much to the online audience. I'll take the last question from Viola on why the GOE's budget is not included. The government-owned enterprises budget, 63 of them, were submitted along with the federal budget to the National Assembly. But the nature of the way the National Assembly works is they first of all work on the federal budget, and then they now work on the individual GOE's budget. But the process is still they remit to the president, and it now goes to the agencies as they work on them. So the GOE's budget is integrated in the fiscal frameworks, that is their revenue and expenditure. We have also interrogated their budgets before putting them together and submitting them to national budget. Earlier on in my presentation, I did say that 63 GOE's budgets were part of what was submitted by His Excellency the President to the National Assembly. I want to ask DG Budget to speak to what we are doing in terms of monitoring and of the budget, and also what we have put in place in terms of enhanced transparency and accountability and citizens' participation. And the PAMSEC Finance to speak about the synergy that we have with the subnational governments. I believe the question raised on ways and means have been addressed by myself earlier on, and also the steps to reduce recurrent and capital expenditure increase also will be addressed by the DG Budget. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much for that question on the issue of synergy between the federal government and the subnational government. In the first instance, if you look at the National Development Plan, before it was put together, federal government, state government, and all the stakeholders got together. This is part of the effort of federal government to ensure that we bring in the subnationals. And this was not the case in the past. Oftentimes, you just hear that the federal government will prepare national development plan without involving the state government, but this has changed. With respect to our regular interaction with the state government, you are aware that every month we have the Federation Account Allocation Committee meeting, whereby the money accruing to the pool, that is the Federation Account pool, is shared among the three tiers of government based on the formula specified in the constitution of the country. So these are the essential tools that we use. And each time we have the National Council for Economic Development, we invite all the state governments. They are part and parcel of this. And as you know, this feeds into our National Development Plan and any fiscal policy issues that we want to issue at the national level. So these are the different layers of interaction that we have in order to ensure synergy overall. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Chris Azor asked what monitoring and evaluation resources are included in the budget. Well, the way the budget works currently is that individual MDAs make their own provisions for their M&E expenditure. Going forward, however, we intend to standardize the basis for this provision and to mandate it, because the truth is some MDAs do not make adequate provision for for M&E in their own budget. And as I've said earlier, it's a critical aspect of effective project implementation. I think Honorable Blessing Ojoma says, what is government doing to reduce recurrent expenditure? Recurrent expenditures are broadly in 4 categories. The most significant one being personnel costs. The truth is, currently, there's not much that we can do to bring down the personnel cost. Because even though it will seem, when you mention the absolute number, 5.2 trillion naira for personnel costs for 2023, it will sound like a really big number. But if you consider that this covers all of the about 1.5 million federal government employees across all sectors, including the security and defense agencies. If you actually divide that amount by this aggregate number of employees, you will get an amount that works out to 200 and something thousand naira per month average. So while in aggregate it looks like such a humongous amount, in fact, the other truth also, and this is an argument I've made, value. People say the federal government workforce is over-bloated. And I say, not really, in aggregate. If you take the total number of federal employees and compare with the number of central government employees in many countries, in relation to their population and which is the people that are to be served, and even their GDP, you'll find that Nigeria's numbers are actually on the low side. However, it is true that in some areas we seem to have more people than we need, and in some other areas we have less people than we need. For instance, our police, approximately 300,000, some people argue that we need at least double that number. So and that's the sort of rebalancing that the, Office of the Head of Civil Service of the Federation, working with ourselves, is trying to accomplish, rather than, so the hope for a significant cut in overall expenditure on personnel is not one that really is founded on solid at this point in time. Overhead costs, the overhead budget for government is actually very tight for most of the agencies. And so again, there's not much room, given also the inflationary impact. We have debt service with the interest payments. That's another significant. There isn't much room for anything to cut there, other than the strenuous effort in its debt management strategy that the DMO makes to try and shift our debt to lower cost debt and try and keep that as low as possible. And then we have what we call service-wide provisions, whether it's for military or other security operations and other debt for payment of insurance policies and all of those. Those again. So the bottom line really is we have actually been managing our recurrent budget as tightly as we can. And what we have in our recurrent budget is largely non-discretionary, and we do not have much room to cut. And that's why we keep submitting that the real solution is in growing our revenues, so we have a greater capacity to spend. It is because our revenues are so low that it looks like our expenditures are high. If you look at our expenditures, the total government expenditure for Nigeria, the public expenditure ratio to the GDP, is the lowest even on the continent. So it's not that government is spending too much money. It's actually that we are not spending enough money. And that's why critical services like social services and are perhaps not at the level that they ought to be. But at the same time, in all of this, we're pressing hard to keep capital expenditures as high as we can. And when you aggregate all of the capital expenditures for 2023, in the 2023 budget, again, it comes to over 6 trillion naira. Then, enhanced transparency and accountability. That's what we keep deploying, increasing. We believe that increasing use of technology is one way to do this. And so, for instance, in government, nobody accepts cash, nobody pays cash. That's one. We have the Treasury portal, where all government payments, 5 million naira and above, are reported for public scrutiny. We have, on every agency of government is mandated to have a website on which they put out information concerning their operations, including financial information. For us in the Ministry of Finance, we have, there's the central, ministry headquarters website. We have the budget office website. We have in the National Planning Arm's website. On all of this is a lot of information about government's operations, including, its financial, transactions for people to be able to review and basically scrutinize them. And so these are some of the things that are being done in terms of the effort to enhance transparency and accountability. Of course, there's a deliberate effort to involve the people. We have now, for instance, even this M&E, we recognize in the budget for 2022, there are over 1,000 projects. It is not feasible for our people to be at all of these project sites across all the 774 local governments of the Federation. And so we've created these technology platforms for the people to be able to see, if you see something, say something. And we've provided, those platforms, whether it is the iMonitor platform on the Budget Office website, the recently launched iMac. We also have an app on Google Play Store, or an M&E app that is free. You can download it, and with that, whatever you see, you can take a picture, you can post this, and all of us be part of this, because this is a budget for Nigeria. We own it. It's not the ministry's budget. So we all have to basically own it and take charge of promoting the transparency and accountability. Thank you.
Good day, distinguished participants. I just want to elaborate more on the area of monitoring and evaluation, and also on synergy with the states, the subnationals. It is done through so many layers and thematic areas. On page 42 of the slide presented by the Honorable Minister, there are 3 online portals where any citizen can access what the ministry is doing. The third one is iMac. This iMac, let me speak more on it. It was launched last month by Mr. President during the Federal Executive Council, and is domiciled in the National Monitoring and Evaluation Department in the planning arm of the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget, and National Planning. And why do we call it iMac? Any citizen can see a project location online with geo-coordinates and reference it. Compare, if in whichever community you are, you can identify this project, whether it is as reported You can give feedback through the website. Also, in terms of infrastructure, we have the infrastructure department in the planning arm too. So after the planning, they also reach out to the departments of all the MDAs to monitor how far on the level of implementation. And with states, we collaborate at so many different levels. We have as you are aware, Nigeria has signed up to the Open Governorship Partnership, OGP. It's a nationwide, it's a worldwide monitoring. It's an association for open governorship, for transparency, and very highly rated at that. Nigeria is part of it, and the state governments, about 19 state governments have signed up with us on this open governorship partnership, OGP. Then again, if, like I said, it depends on also the thematic areas. In issue of in the social sector, we have the Department of Social Development, and on issues of nutrition, this department handles it. And we have the National Council on Nutrition, which also involves the state governments as part of this very important exercise. We'll liaise with states. As we all know, why nutrition? A healthy populace is a wealthy populace. To achieve our targets, our aims, development agenda and aims, we need a very healthy populace. And then again, through the National Economic Council, headed by the Vice President, and also anchored in the in the planning arm of the ministry, we regularly meet with all the state governors, and issues of monitoring, development, assessment of results also come up. And solving problems, like recently there was flood devastation that affected a number of states, and a subcommittee of the NEC was set to look into it. And we've gone around some states, and we've been getting reports from states on how the federal government can intervene. And this informed partly some of the provisions that you see in the 2022 supplementary appropriation that was recently signed by Mr. President. So this monitoring, evaluation, this synergy, it has different layers, and we're working very, very closely with the states. And even the commissioners of planning, we have what we call a committee of practice, where all the commissioners of planning and budget in the states, where we meet regularly to also look at the developmental issues. Thank you.
Since this government is all about transparency and inclusiveness, we'll take our last batch of questions from our virtual participants. This one is coming from Abiodun Shorunke, and it says, kindly send full slides and videos to us. Thanks. It is on the website of the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning. It's an interactive website, Abiodun, so please step in there and then glean everything you need. The second one is coming from Olugbenga Olufemi Oyenuga. It says, good day all. My own concern is that what will be impacts of this budget on the new administration that will come in May 2023? We have another one from Chris Paul Otaigbe of the NABN TV based in the United States of America. The question reads, we have a deficit of over 11 trillion naira. Meanwhile, the ongoing controversy surrounding the stamp duty trillions has blown open that revenue window. To cut to the chase, with the stamp duty discovery, is the ministry looking in this direction to fund the deficit? If not, why? And if so, what are the plans? That's from Chris Paul Otaigbe of NABN TV, based in the US. We also have another one from Olusegun Folarin. It says, thank you for this presentation. Please, the actual foreign exchange rate closed at 461 naira 50 kobo to a dollar at 31st December 2022. Is there plans to revise the budget reference rates to reflect this exchange instead of 453 naira to a dollar used in the 2023 budget? Ma'am, those are the questions we have. And for every other person who has a question, remember the ministry has an interactive online platform. Drop your questions there and responses will come. The podium, please.
Let me just thank the online audience for the questions and the requests that you have made. And to address first the questions made by Olubenga Oyenuga, what he said is, what will be the impact of this budget in the on the next administration? I think we have discussed this earlier on, to say that what we're doing is a requirement of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The Constitution requires that the administration should prepare an annual appropriation act. It does not stop from the next administration coming to say we will review this budget, and in doing that, they will have to go back to the National Assembly to amend the budget. But we have designed this budget to make things seamless, make transition seamless and easy for the next administration. We have carefully looked at measures that will ease the transition process. We've made adequate provision for election, adequate provision for the transition processes so that the transition itself will be seamless. On the issue of the deficit that is in the budget at 10.8 trillion, this stamp duty that is subject of discourse is still a subject of various levels of investigation. There's an investigation that is being carried out by a committee. There's an investigation that is being carried out also by some security agencies. So we are anxiously waiting for the outcome of these investigations. If funds are realized from this investigation, it will help us in funding the government 2023 budget. On the issue of the foreign exchange rate, the foreign exchange rate is a rolling rate. It continues to change on a daily basis. We will be using the foreign exchange rate as already approved into law by the budget, but we've also made a provision in the budget that allows us to reap what we call exchange gain. So at the time of conversion of any FX inflows that come, whatever levels are higher than the budget rate goes into an exchange rate account, which is also pooled along with Federation revenue and shares. So we do harness the difference in that manner. I want to thank everyone for your contributions here today.
And I believe she has withstood the litmus test of interrogation. Please give her a better round of applause. For every good event that has a grand beginning must have a closing that has gratitude in it. For gratitude always elevates altitude. Please join me welcome the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Finance, Malam Aliu Ahmed, to step forward with the words of gratitude for all of us online and on site who have participated in today's event. Please, a round of, okay? All right. We might be reshuffling decks or? Okay. We're not. Okay. It shall be a combined, okay, so it will be combined honors, but he goes first. A round of applause for him. Okay.
Thank
so
you.
I think, let me just clarify that. So he would do the wrap-up and the thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you so very much, our very amiable and articulate MC. I think we should also give a good round of applause. Thank you very much. Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Mrs. Dr. Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed. We also hear that the Honorable Minister of Water Resources are online. I believe probably other ministers. Senator Adeola Olamilekon Solomon, who is the Senate Committee Chair on Finance. We thank you for your support and for being online and for your intervention. DG Budget, PAMSEC Budget and Planning, PAMSEC Budget and Planning, DG Budget Office, DG DMO, our numerous, very numerous online participants. Thank you for staying through this very important exercise. As you heard, this is the budget of fiscal consolidation and transition. And I dare say this is one of the most consequential budgets of this administration. And I say this for a number of reasons. First, this is the exit budget of this administration. And you see that emphasis is on completing those projects that can be completed. And of course, those ones that will still have time to run will be funded. As the minister said, government is a continuum. And the third thing is that why this is consequential is that this is a transition year. So you will see a spike in allocation to INEC, which is responsible for conducting election of this scale, because it's only at the end of tenure like this that you see a lot of elections, unlike mid-season elections where you see few states elections being held. And of course, you also see a spike in allocation to the courts for obvious reasons. I do hope one day we'll get to a situation whereby there will be absolutely zero litigations after election, but it's not possible. So you see a spike in allocation to the judiciary as well. Let me also talk about an issue that DG Budget and Minister of Finance and Senator Olamilekan raised, which is the issue of, and this is normal. Every budget has two legs, revenue and expenditure. But in time past, our efforts and concentration had always been, what has been allocated to defense, health, education, without really talking about how the revenue come together. But you have heard from the Senate Committee Chair on Finance, you've heard from the Minister of Finance, you've heard from the DG Budget, that we are all aligned in trying to ensure that we bring about a robust revenue framework to ensure that we properly fund this budget. And most importantly, if you look at the composition of the funding sources of this budget, 78% is coming from the oil sector, 22% from oil sector. This, with all due modesty, is a big deal. In time past, it's the opposite. The minister says so. We used to have 70 for oil, 30 for non-oil. So we have completely flipped the funding sources of budget. And we do hope that the incoming administration will be able to maintain this. This is a very significant achievement of this administration. And if you juxtapose this against the GDP composition, You know, sometimes when you hear analysts in the media talking about Nigeria, our GDP not diversified, you start scratching your head. Because look at the composition that was presented today. The economy is completely diversified. Maybe the conversation should be around what are we going to do or what are we doing in order to ensure that we diversify the foreign flows, foreign exchange revenue of the government, which still remain really high in favor of the oil. So that is what the conversation should be about. And a number of things are being done. At least one, CBN is doing a great job of trying to ensure that the revenue from our foreign exchange revenue, the funding sources are diversified. Of course, with the support of the fiscal authorities. And if I say fiscal here, it's not only Ministry of Finance. What Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment is doing, what we are doing in agri, is all constituting to what the fiscal is doing in order to ensure that we get foreign exchange, improve foreign exchange flows. Finally, the minister talked about the finance bill, which is still being worked on, which has been passed anyway. But this bill in particular brought clarity around tax equity, tax reform incentive by phasing out antiquated pioneer industry tax relief. And of course, lastly, all the allocations to the sectors, which is what we used to focus on in the past. Allocation to education, health, defense, infrastructure, social investment, which are important in their own right, but we should not forget that it's always important to focus on the revenue that underpin them. Lastly, I want to use this opportunity, since I'm also doing the vote of thanks, to thank you for really staying through from 10 o'clock to this time. This is almost, we're heading to 3.5 hours thereabout, and especially our online audience who were, they are not sure of what was happening. You know, once you are connected and you are not hearing anything, you start getting fidgety about what you need to do. So it's very important. And we also have the senior special advisor on social investment who has sat through the whole process. We really appreciate your being here. And of course, the special advisor to Mr. President on budget matters, Senate, who was with us at the beginning, but he has left. So we thank all of you and all the very, very numerous participants who are online for your patience and for your participation. And to, of course, most importantly, the first estate of the realm who are here, men and women, even though the minister said so, is now gentlemen of the press. But a special recognition is also given to the ladies of the press. Thank you for your very robust engagement. And then, of course, we also thank the minister, the DG Budget, and the DG DMO for their robust responses to the questions that have been asked. As you have seen in the PowerPoint circulated online, there are avenues for continuous engagement on budget matters. You have the iMonitor, you have the Citizens Budget Monitoring app, you have the iMark, which you can continue to engage, and let's have your views on how to implement this budget better. So we thank you really for coming and for staying through. And of course, to colleagues in the ministry, directors and other colleagues who are also here as well, I must thank you for your patience and for staying through this engagement. So thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you. MC, thank you very much. Yeah.
Shall we all rise for the national anthem? Members of the Fourth Estate, wait. Arise, O compatriots, Nigeria's song to serve our fatherland with Thank you so very much for your time. Please, we shall remain upstanding as we allow members of the table of responsibility take their exits, and then we shall leave. Thank you. Think of how you can grow Nigeria. Monitor it, market, I market, interrogate it, and contribute to the growth of Nigeria. My name is Glory Ohago, and it's been a privilege being this voice servant of today. Thank you.